Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today, I'm going to be doing a brand new original tag created by my friend Gavin at Genre Books, and this is called the Howzat, an original Booktube tag. Gavin created this new tag on the theme of the sport of cricket. Gavin said that all of the prompts are based vaguely around the best sporting contest in the world, the Ashes. And Gavin went on to explain in his video that the Ashes is a famous tournament in the sport. It is based on one of the oldest rivalries in the sport between England and Australia. And Gavin also said that it goes on for multiple months, and that there are 5 matches each, and each one, there are 5 matches, and each one is played for 5 days. Gavin also said that this phenomenal rivalry between these two countries, this very famous tournament, is also played, he said, for one of the smallest trophies in all of athletics. I know nothing about cricket, so this is going to be sort of funny. The prompts all have cricket terminology in as a subject, but then Gavin related that cricket concept to something to do with books or reading. So I've got plenty of books to talk about. Gavin will tell me whether I've been able to make the cricket connection or not. Anyway, this is going to be fun. And if you're a real cricket fan, I apologize in advance. Please don't be offended by my complete ignorance of the sport. Number 1, opening batsman. A writer who builds a solid opening of a book or just a great first line. Well, right now I'm gearing up for a big Dickens read along. I'm going to be reading a lot of Charles Dickens in a couple of different reading events, and I think Dickens does openings of books really well. I'm going to be rereading A Christmas Carol actually for 2 events. I'm participating in Dickens in December, and I'm participating in The Ghosts of Christmas Past. And A Christmas Carol fits both of those events. This is a very famous opening, and this is just an example of what Dickens does with his openings. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. That's one example. I think, one of my 2 favorite Dickens novels, one is Bleak House. That has a very famous, several opening paragraphs. My other favorite is David Copperfield, and this has a really interesting opening too. Now this is David Copperfield as narrator who is telling his life story. So he opens it. Chapter 1, I am born. Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life, or whether that station will be held by anybody else, these pages must show. To begin my life with the beginning of my life, I record that I was born, as I have been informed and believe, on a Friday at 12 o'clock at night. It was remarked that the clock began to strike, and I began to cry simultaneously. Now, this is a really famous opening to a novel, and other writers have played off of that opening. We have been reading this past month, and I finished this last week, John Irving's novel, The Cider House Rules, and David Copperfield figures prominently in this novel. But I recently found out that before Irving named the book The Cider House Rules, his first working title was The Hero of His Own Life, which he took from David Copperfield. And then also a book that I talk about on, on many occasions is J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. This is one of my many editions, a very old edition. But I'm just going to read you the opening of Salinger because he also plays off of David Copperfield. Chapter 1. If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born and what my lousy childhood was like and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me and all that David Copperfield kind of crap. But I don't feel like going into it if you want to know the truth. In the first place, that stuff bores me. And in the second place, my parents would have about 2 hemorrhages apiece if I told anything pretty personal about them. So it's a very important opening. And then, probably Dickens' most famous and most well-known opening to a novel is the opening of A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or for evil in the superlative degree of comparison only. So, Dickens does openings well. Okay, I'm not going to go on and on for every single prompt. I just really like that question. Number 2, opening partner. A writer who you've built a relationship with over time. For that, I am going to just briefly mention Louise Erdrich. I have been reading Louise Erdrich since the early 1980s, which I think is when she first published her first novel. And I have been reading her throughout my adult life and throughout her writing career. And she's definitely one of my favorite authors. Number 3, first change. Imagine you have finished a book you did not enjoy or DNF a book. Who is the dependable author you will turn to who won't let you down? Somebody I've talked about many times on the channel is Louise Penny, who writes the Inspector Armand Gamache mystery series, and she's just an old faithful for me. If I don't know what to read next, which is rare, but I know that I can turn to her. If I've been unsettled or unhappy with something that I've been reading, I know that Louise Penny will never let me down. Okay, number 4, middle order. What are the last 3 books you've read that, were you to mark them out of 5, would get a definite 3? I don't use star ratings. I don't use number ratings, so I couldn't really answer this looking at the last books that I've read. But I'm thinking, if a 3 is just sort of, it was okay, it was mediocre, but it wasn't anything, it wasn't something I would DNF, but it wasn't something to write home about. I couldn't come up with three. I have two. Now, I just finished talking about how important Louise Erdrich has been to my, reading life since my early adulthood. But I didn't love her last novel, The Mighty Red. I certainly didn't hate it. I finished it. It was a book group read. But if I gave number ratings, which I probably will never do. I guess. This was not one of her best. As you know, I spent many months reading the 7 novels of Claudia Pinheiro that have thus far been translated into English, and I would say one of my best reads of the year was in that batch. But there were a couple that we weren't really thrilled with. If I were to give a number rating, I think her novel Betty Boo might be a 3. It definitely wouldn't be a top read. It wouldn't be a 4 or a 5. So those were the only two I could come up with. Number 5, Wicket Keeper. Tell us about a strong or eccentric character. I'm going to go with eccentric. I've also been doing a deep dive this past month, and will be continuing into December, of John Irving. And a book I've talked about several times on the channel is my favorite John Irving novel, and that is A Prayer for Owen Meany. And I think the character of Owen Meany is definitely one that would be considered an eccentric character. When the novel starts, he's a small child, but he grows to adulthood in the novel. He's a very unusually small character, and he has a very unusual voice. He's characterized by his voice, and in fact, Irving writes his dialogue in a different way than he writes other characters' dialogue in order to convey the weirdness of his voice. He's so tiny that people pick him up and pass him around, but as small as he is, he has the exact opposite size personality. He has a huge personality. And he believes in the course of this novel that he is God's instrument, and that he has been sent, to Earth to have a certain impact on some of the people in his life. So he has an unusual belief system. He is larger than life in spite of the size of his physical person, he's a charming and just really exciting and powerful character. Okay, that's Owen Meany. Okay, number 6, all-rounder. A writer who you think is excellent in multiple genres. For that, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite science fiction writers, and that's Ursula K. Le Guin. And I have been struck by the fact that Le Guin writes in many different genres. I have a box set of some of her works. And just in this volume 1, we have several of her novels that were part of the Hainish cycle, but also a bunch of short stories as well. So this particular volume includes a couple of her most famous novels, The Left Hand of Darkness and The Dispossessed. So, she's a novelist and a short story writer, or she was, rather. And I also have her collected poems. She was quite an accomplished poet as well, and this whole volume is her poetry. And then late in her life, she tried another genre, and she became a blogger. This was like right at the end of her life, and this collection, No Time to Spare, Thinking About What Matters, is a collection of her writings about, being over 80. It's a collection of her writings that she wrote for her blog. So, there we've got, she was, it says here that in the last great frontier of life, old age, she explored a new literary territory, the blog. So we've got novels, short stories, poetry, and blog entries as well. So, and she's wonderful wherever she's writing and however she's writing. Okay, number 7. Spinner, a writer who completely bamboozled and deceived you with a plot twist. Well, that sounds a little negative, a writer who bamboozled me. And this was actually a wonderful read, and I did review this novel on the channel. And that's Fredrik Backman's newest novel, My Friends. And while I didn't feel bamboozled, I definitely was surprised. I was definitely thrown by the way this book ended. Things that I thought were going to happen, things that I was absolutely sure the whole narrative was moving toward, didn't happen. They didn't happen at all. And some things that I never expected did happen. And it was a very, very satisfying ending. I loved this novel. I mean, I did review it very positively earlier in, I think it was in the summer. Okay. But that was a plot twist, or a series of plot twists that did surprise me. Okay, number 8, Fast Bowler. Tell us about a writer where you rate their short stories above their novels. Well, I do love this writer, and I do love his novels, but I think Ray Bradbury is at his best in his short stories. Now, some books that are sold as novels are actually collections of his short stories, like The Martian Chronicles, for instance. That's really a collection of stories. But I think while some of his novels I have absolutely loved, Fahrenheit 451 being one of them, and The Martian Chronicles too, although I don't really think that's a novel. And Something Wicked This Way Comes, that's a novel that I also loved. I think he's at his greatest strength in the short story genre. And this is just a wonderful collection of 100 of his most celebrated tales. He actually has a bunch of short stories that didn't even make it into this volume. Okay. Number 9, Chin Music. A book with a brutal or visceral scene that left scars. For that, I'm going to just talk about The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, which I read with a group here on Booktube in the winter. And, this is an incredible novel, certainly one of Dostoevsky's most famous novels. But there was a chapter early in the book that almost derailed my reading of the rest of the novel, and it was a chapter about cruelty, and it was specifically about cruelty to a child. And it was about, parents being cruel to their own child. And I was really unnerved by it. I was really upset by it. And I thought, I can't believe I'm going to DNF a Dostoevsky novel. I didn't. I went on, I fought through, and that cruelty did not, carry through the whole book. But I was really messed up by that scene. Okay, number 10, 12th Man, Refreshments. Suggest a palate cleanser of a book. Well, for that, I'm just going to talk about this series that I've certainly mentioned on the channel before. These are just comfort reads for me, and this is a writer I can, turn to just to get, if something has been upsetting or just, a bad reading experience, to get that kind of out of my heart and mind. I just love Travis Baldree. And as I've said on several occasions, these are before I go to sleep kinds of reading where I know I'm not going to have, I'm going to be able to calm down, and I'm not going to have nightmares about either what I was just reading or what I was hearing about in the news. So I think those could all be considered palate cleansers and comfort reads. Okay, and then number 11, tag others. Well, as I always do, as I always say, if you are watching this and you'd like to get in on this cricket-themed tag, and you don't have to know anything about cricket. Clearly, I don't know anything about cricket, but you just have to be able to talk about books. If you'd like to get in on this, please consider yourself tagged. Gavin has tagged a lot of people. I'm also going to tag a bunch of people in the notes below. As always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.